The title poem of that work is The Arkansas Testament, which is the title poem of this work, in which he autographed for me. I met him in the 90s, certainly in 94, that's the date on this book. He was at the waterfront, harborfront Readers Festival, which takes place in fall, as I recall, in Toronto. And I happened to be walking down a hall, and he was sitting on a bench, and I stopped and I said something entirely innocuous, like, thanks for writing about my life. Two things I remembered about him, about that encounter. What he said, which was, "Thank you, son," and the tone of his voice. And it reminded me, the tone and timbre of his voice reminded me of someone who has done away with everything that is superfluous in his life. And that reminded me of a certain kind of person that I grew up knowing here on these islands, which are fishermen. And I thought about it, for some reason I just thought of him as a fisherman. And when you think about it, if you spend your life in a boat which is about 6, 8, 10 feet long, and you see them every day as I go by, I'm saying it's in Nevis, out, basically alone with nothing between you and the sky and the sea but this wooden boat, I think it teaches you something about yourself and about life, and that it takes away everything. It burns away the dross, I think, and that gets translated in the way you speak, the tone of voice you have, and that's what struck me about him. He reminded me of, and of course, being an artist and a poet, he would have, of course, done away with everything that's superfluous and everything that's not meaningful in his life. But that struck me about him. I don't think I'm going to read the whole poem because it's fairly long. And what I like about it, and I don't know if it's because I myself, like him, the character here in this is an immigrant. He talks about things which I find familiar, the sound of the tires, the police car going by, the sound of the tire on the road. That early morning in winter when no one's stirring and you're alone outside and everything seems magnified. The sound of the truck going around wetting the street, the paper boy throwing his papers, him walking to get his coffee, the first fuselage of coffee as he describes. And when he goes into the restaurant and everyone stops because this is the United States and you have to make obeisance to race, and he's obviously a stranger. And what he does when he laughs, but he realizes in laughing that the laughing is too much, and it's because there's that ease on ease, and then everyone goes back to being themselves. He talks about going into the bedroom of his motel and throwing himself across the bed with his key in his right hand and feeling that key and looking at the sun on the wall, and the mark on the wall that two people had obviously been, I think the word he uses is rotten, had made, and the cockroach sailing across, the legs become oars across the carpet. Just an exquisitely poem, and it's something about, I'm sure just in this poem he's talking about the guys who go out to hunt and kill for no apparent reason, no apparent good reason. And he makes the comment that it's something in their blood. And I always remember that there's a recent photograph in social media of this young woman, an American, of course, somewhere in Africa with a gun. And she has the gun barrel up and she's smiling and looks very contented and happy. And beside her is a giraffe. And that sort of thing, it says something about the United States, I think, and I think he captured that in that one line. It's something in their blood. And this poem, I think, is my favorite poem of his. I would recommend it to you, the Arkansas Testament, and it's just a wonderful piece of work. There's something personal about it. When I was getting my first book published, I took it around under the auspices of Meredith Phipps Warner, who took me to see a professor who has since passed, who taught at the Fitzroy Bryant college in St. Kitts. And she read the manuscript and then spoke to me. And in speaking to me, she kept saying, oh, he would come to class and talk to us about the relationship between his words and his paintings and the images he creates by words and paintings, and spoke about that. Her task at that school was to teach teachers how to teach poetry. And the he she had been referring to is is another poet, not Leonard Cohen, who was just passed also, but to Sir Derek Walcott. And I thought to myself after, well, if she's thinking about my work and all she could think of is Derek Walcott, maybe something there. And that was one reason why I said, okay, then I'll go ahead and publish. So I've really, really admired. The thing that I find astonishing about Walcott is the way he can hold you and take you through his work. There's I think it's called the Normandy Hotel. And he talks about his daughter diving into the pool and diving on the water and then coming up. And in that stretch, he prays that she makes the surface. And it's done so exquisitely, you find yourself also holding your breath and praying. He talks about, it's just a wonderful, 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 in Omeros, which took me years to read. I'd read 3-4 pages and have my mind shattered by the brilliance of his imagery. I was reading at one point, and he's talking about describing the shadow of a banister on the stairs. And he does something very unusual in that in his words he makes time slip, in that you see the banister move not by time, as it would slowly as the passage of time, but instantaneously. And it just shattered me. And it took me many, many years to finish reading Omeros. In fact, I don't know if I have finished that. And it's just a delight to read and very instructive. I learned about enjambment through him. I would marvel if you read his work, you would find that it reads almost like prose, and the internal rhymings and so on. But if you look on the page, it rhymes on the page, but you don't hear that rhyme as you read it. That's a technique called enjambment or enjambment. Anyway, I learned that from reading him, and he's just a wonderful, 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 astonishing poet, and I suppose one can say the same thing of him as a man. I admire his work. I respect his work deeply. I have nothing but praise and humble adoration for his work and his contribution to West Indian letters. I'm very, very glad that he was knighted. That is a tradition here. I have an uncle who was knighted, Sir Dudley Hastings Huggins. And I'm from a generation where that meant something, or cricketers, were also knighted. And so to me, he's part of that pantheon of accomplished heroes in our society who have been acknowledged with a knight, commander, a knighthood. And that was done last year. Anyway, I hope that if you are a poet, everyone reads Love, his poem about, finding yourself at your door and looking at your mirror and peeling it off. It's a wonderful poem. But for me, I think maybe because he writes in this particular work, Our Countess Testament, for me, it is the one that I find most evocative, most touching, most meaningful. I would recommend any of his works, The Hound of Tiplow, Bounty, as I was reading, and anything that he's written is bound to yield useful and meaningful inner communication. I think that when we read works, poetry, we communicate with the inner world. In any case, I just wanted to share that with you and to share my sense of his passing and that if any of you, I'm sure if you're a poet, you would have known of him, but I would encourage you to read his work, because it is deeply affecting, deeply moving, and an honor to actually be in a position to be alive at the time when he's alive and read his work, and actually met him, although the meeting was just in passing. It's not, I didn't know him personally. So that's it, just my contribution to my memory of Derek Walcott. I have several, I used to go to those meetings and get autographed copies of books of authors that I read. So it's a loved book, as all my books are. And just celebrate his life by, I think, by reading one of his poems and being reacquainted with excellency and the very best that West Indian literary culture has to offer. Okay.